This is Edward and Ann, sonsofgod.com. It's Thursday evening, and this is a very random podcast this evening, but then we always have random podcasts. What's that?
It's the 3rd.
It's the 3rd of June, yeah. And Chesney, our dog, is here. He's really focused. He's always focused. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's a family affair. I had an opportunity to review some of the deep things that God has shown us over the years. And that's really what began this whole thought process about Imagine and the story format that we're going to use on some of the podcasts rather than making it structured. Not that we have ever been really very structured, but I think we're going to be a little bit more unstructured with the story format in what we are able to talk about and present, all under the guise of the adventures of Aidan and Sawyer. An adventurous duo if ever I met a pair. Their journey, like our journey, begins with arriving here on planet Earth. Of course, they're a bit younger, so their sojourn hasn't been as long. And so they're just kind of coming online right now to really catch up with some of the things that God prepared them for before He sent them. You know, imagine with me, if you will, but it doesn't take that much imagination, really. Before each one of you came, before Aidan and Sawyer came to the earth in this present sojourn, we were sitting around talking with the Father and the Lord. And of course they said, I have an assignment for you. And of course it wasn't an option. I mean, whatever the Lord wants, we're more than driven to do. And so, as we sat around the table, reflecting, God began to speak about what was going to come to pass in the earth, about the fulfillment that the sons of God will bring, that has been written in the Scriptures from days of old, all waiting for a culmination during this time. As we began to reflect, we talked with the Father because we had full memory, full remembrance. Not that we remembered perhaps to the detail of every time that we've come, but we have an overview of our time with the Father and our time with the Lord. And ever since the dawn of creation. In fact, one of the things that we've reflected on is that aspect of remembering the early days when we sat with the Father and the Lord at the dawn of creation. It speaks about how the sons of God sang, and it was a great momentous time. Well, we remember that very well in the spirit, but as we transition down to this natural plane, which we have all obviously done, it's not as easy to remember those times that we've had with the Father. Those times where we sat and spoke of what was and what was going to come forth And we didn't really, I think, understand exactly what the preparation was that we were going through at the time before coming, much less what would be required of us and the changes that it would bring, not only to us, but to all of the kingdom of God, and what that preparation and present sojourn would bring forth in an everlasting change within all of our spirits, actually all of our essence, spirit, soul, and body. We honestly didn't realize the significance of what this last sojourn was going to be all about. And I'm happy to say that this is the last sojourn. And as I was reflecting, we were looking back, and the Lord reminded us in just a wisp of a moment. I like that wisp. It's kind of a wisp. It's kind of a wispy evening. But in a wisp of a moment, He gave us a panoramic view of every time each of us have come. Not that we understand the dynamics of it, but we know that each time that we came, we remembered a little bit more and a little bit more. In some ways, it's almost like Groundhog Day, the movie. Waking up every morning and restarting again, kind of like a rerun and a rerun and a rerun again. And it's been a little bit like that for every one of God's sons, because to remember why you've been sent is a very deep thing. It's like in ministry over the years to different ones that came to the conclusion after growing up and becoming a little bit more wiser that you really can't tell people what God is doing for them or what they have to do or what they have to see, because it's not going to do anything. You can tell someone, well, you're called to be this, you're that, or whatever you might want to say. But it's not really going to bring about any real change, because it's tied into seeing the Lord. Everyone has to see the Lord for themselves. And then that magical moment of change happens. How many times we would minister in the churches and people would come up every week, every Sunday, and they'd oftentimes want the same thing again and again and again. And we'd minister to them and pray for them, and then the next Sunday they'd be back again, because they weren't seeing for themselves. And for someone to tell you, it doesn't achieve the change that has to happen in the inner man. That's why it's very difficult to get a word for someone on this path of sonship, really. Because the change that's needed to happen only happens when they individually, or each of us, it's very personal, really see the Lord. And when that word comes alive and you see it within you, and it's not theory any longer, then that's when the change happens. That's when it comes together, because you see it for yourself. No one has to tell you. You see it for yourself. And so this last sojourn's been very interesting, because it's taken a number of times going around this mountain and each time seeing a little bit more and a little bit more, but still not really remembering until this last time. It was this last time that we saw the sons begin to really remember why they were sent, why they are here. Very interesting that it's taken a long time. Sometimes you can look at that and say, well, Lord, if I would have remembered on the second or third sojourn why you sent me, just maybe all of this would already be over. We wouldn't be going through what we're going through. The earth wouldn't still be on this pattern. Things would have come to a conclusion sooner. And I'm not going to say that that is absolutely a fact or not. I'd say it's a probability, a good probability. It's like a word that had come from the Lord recently, and then we remember it coming about 30, 40 years ago. And it talked about the jeopardy that the church was at that time. And that if people didn't begin to walk in what God had revealed to them, if they didn't begin to really step outside the box and let go and really become, that it would cause another 1,000 years of darkness. I assume that that has not been the case because we're a handful are still seeing. The majority are blind. I don't even know, and I can't even say. But it was never about many. It was always about a handful. A handful, even just one, can make a difference. And I think that's been the case. A handful has held on to the vision, held on to the word, and is walking it out, even when the vast majority have either stepped away or just stopped moving and kind of become stuck in their path, stuck in their religion, stuck in their perceptions, afraid to move out, afraid to allow God to bring them into a real walk with God. And I think that's a root issue more than we realize, that people come to a place and they really don't want to walk with God. Those that are called to sonship, so many times we've found that they make these choices, and you wonder, why did they make that choice? Why can't they see? And a lot of it comes down to leaving the comfort zone, really allowing the Lord to bring you into a walk in the Spirit that is second to none. I mean, Elijah was a man of like passions. I think that's in the book of James, but he was pretty off the wall, Elijah was. And the sons that are really breaking free to walk with God in this hour have got to let everything go. That has been the requirement. Let everything go. Bear the reproach. Doesn't matter what people call you or think of you. You're certainly not going to look normal. And there aren't that many that really want a walk in the Spirit, where God begins to cut the tethers that have held them back and launch them into something that just stretches them to the uttermost. So if you've been feeling a little stretched lately, that's why. I mean, there are times when it feels like you're in slow motion. Nothing's happening. But you can't take that as a reading either. Every day is a new day that is unfolding with its challenges and demands. And so this podcast series we titled Imagine, because we're going to talk about adventures that are very real, but they're extremely outside the box of what we've known as reality. But there are things that we need to become aware of. We need to make this transition out of the realm of the soul and out of the realm of the norm into another world. And we're so close. And I know that can be frustrating, can be challenging, because you're so close, yet it could feel like you're miles away. But the fact is, we're so close to the transition. Maybe not the transition into resurrection life at this point, although I know that we're right here at the door, but at least the transition out of this level of consciousness into something that changes your whole set of paradigms, changes everything. And I mean, we've been changing. The suns have been changing. You have been changing. We've watched people go through things. And I remember a word the Lord gave about 10 years ago, maybe 12. And it was very directed because of what was going on during the time. And he says, I am not in the easy way out. So if you're looking for the easy way out, you won't find me there. Well, we really, and I would say that that's true. We have certainly looked high and low, and we haven't found him there. Lord, your address is not easy. So that's where our journey is going to move with this newest podcast. May not be any scriptures in there. We may throw in some, because all of it has a scriptural foundation in one way or another. But there's a lot of journeys that await us, and a lot of it is tied up in our ability to really imagine and to really just let go. Just imagine it. It was like they called Joseph in the Old Testament, Joseph the dreamer, because he would sit back and would have these dreams. You guys recall them, I'm sure. And I don't know if there were times he just laid on his bed or laid out in the field and looked up at the clouds and just found himself imagining. But that's what we're doing, and that's what we have to do. As interesting as it is, God has called us to be imaginers. I think I just made that word up, but it's part and parcel of what and how we have to function. We have to imagine, because that's going to put legs to the truth and the reality of what God has for the sons. And so our next podcast will be, well, we've got several in mind. We have Aidan and Sawyer meet the king and queen of I don't know where. And honestly, I don't know where. Now, we have another one. At first, we're going to call it the magical balls of light. However, that is very an odd title. So it's going to be something about balls of light, but we haven't quite come up with the title. And let's see what else. Oh, we've got one coming up with Chesney, exactly, our dog. And so we will tell that story from Chesney's perspective. And that was a relatively recent experience that Chesney had. And you might say, well, that sounds really weird. But I think we've already mentioned this before, years ago, that it's not that it's not easy, but we can communicate with the animals. It's just on a different wavelength. We haven't quite taught Chesney how to speak English. In fact, I don't even understand his barking. But on another level, a level or plane of soul, because they don't really have spirits, you can communicate, literally. And you can understand. And it's fascinating to see that, because we had that happen years ago with a horse that lived down the street from us. And quite a horse as he was. He was all about telling us about what it was like living where he lived every day and some of the things he went through. And I'll never forget that. That was very interesting. And then that was followed. We had a couple horses at the time. That was followed with one of our horses. He was a young buck, or actually a buck's a deer, so he's a young horse. And we had an old female horse. And in the vision, of course, he appears in the kitchen sitting on a bar stool, of all things. I don't know what happened to that bar stool. And he was just so bummed that she was, too old for him. I think he was looking to continue his lineage, and she wasn't interested. So, anyway, humorous. It was very humorous. But Chesney's adventure recently was very interesting because he was very much involved in the warfare, and animals. If any of you have any animals, they are sensitive. They are sensitive to the vibration. Oftentimes, you'll see them, looking at a wall or just something, and you kind of wonder, okay, what are you doing? And because they can see, they can sense, and so it's very interesting. And this dog we have here is probably the smartest one that we've ever had. He knows how to play us well, but that's okay. So these are some of the adventures coming up, and in these adventures we'll talk about some realities that are ever present around us. And all it's taking is just a little bit of an awareness of what is here, what is around us, what is accessible, that we might be able to just reach in, grab it. Because I think there's a lot at our disposal, and it's conditional upon us realizing that it's here and just reaching in and grabbing it. So we'll sign off this evening. But this hopefully lays a little bit of a foundation of what we are looking to do as we move down this road of imagination, or this conduit that begins to help channel the spirit realm and bring to pass what we're looking for. With that, we will sign off. Amen.